All right, this recording is going to be on changes to the nusach of the Amidah. Um, Changes which are interesting considering the phrase which I'm going to quote from the Talmud Yerushalmi. So there's a common saying that rabbinic Jews hold halakha l'maaseh according to the Talmud Bavli. However, there's another saying which states that rabbinic Jews or anybody who's holding to the rabbinic tradition are not allowed to change Berakhot or add new Berakhot which were never instituted in the Talmud. And this saying, ironically enough, comes from not the Bavli but the Yerushalmi. It's in Berakhot chapter 9, and it states, "You are not permitted to add to the formula the sages coined for blessings." That is to say, we don't say Berakhot that weren't instituted in the Talmud. So, even though this statement was made as a matter of fact, I guess the Geonim, or later generations after the Talmud, missed the memo. Considering the following blessings, which are said daily, yet were never heard of in the Talmud, are printed in Siddurim pretty much everywhere today and have been for generations. We'll start with the most recent, Hanoten Le'ya'ef Koach, which is from actually a beautiful nusach, and the phrase actually comes from Sefer Yeshaya, chapter 40, verse 19, who gives strength to the weary. The next example is actually a berakha which is said every Friday, Lahalik Ner Shel Shabbat. This berakha was never heard of in the Talmud. The next one, Halik Ner Shel Yom Tov, was also never heard of in the Talmud. Baruch She'amar in Yishtabach, which essentially sandwich the Pesukei de Zimra service, were never heard of in the Talmud. There's different blessings that the Geonim created for Bechot Shachar. That's the morning blessings. Like, for example, Machbiah Shefalim, which is basically giving a blessing for raising the lowly, or Somech Nofelim, which is supports the stumblers. And these are phrases and ideas that come from Pesukim, from Tanakh, but these Berakhot were unheard of by the sages of the Talmud. There's a few others, and they're all said regularly across the globe and have been since the earliest times of the Geonim, and I'm emphasizing that to say after the Talmudic era. Now, I did hear in a shiur once by this gentleman named Moshe Susan, who seems to me to be a real scholar of the Siddur, and he does amazing shiurim at Netivot Yisrael in New York. You can actually go listen to his shiurim on his podcast called Netivot Yisrael, or on his YouTube page, Tefillah Unpacked. I mean, really captivating stuff, and he does a lot of research from traditional and academic scholars on the Siddur. In any case, the whole point of this page is presenting interesting sources that you may not have heard of. Maybe you have, I don't know. But this one, I'll cover variances, like I said, for the 8th and the 17th berakha. And then I'm going to go ahead and change the photo so that way you can see the version that I'm going to show. All right, I'm going to start off with the nusach, which you're probably more familiar with because it's the nusach which is in most Siddurim today. This is the 8th berakha of the Amidah for healing. רפאנו, ארוני ונרפא, הושיענו ונבשע, כי תהילתנו אתה, והעלה רוחה, ומרפא לכל תחלומנו, לכל מחותנו, כי ערף רחמה ונאמנתה, ברוך אתה אדוני ורופא חולי עמו ישראל. Heal us, Adonai, and we will be healed. Save us, and we will be saved. For you are our praise, and bring a cure and healing for all of our ailments, and all our pains, and all of our wounds. For you are a compassionate and faithful healer. Blessed are you, Adonai, who heals the ill of your people, Israel. Before I go over the nusach of Rav Sa'adeh Gaon, which is much, much shorter than the much longer nusach of the Sephardic Siddur, the Ashkenazi Siddur is very similar. Temani Siddur is very similar. And I'm bringing that up just to say that there is a addition to the berakha. Now, it doesn't change the theme, and that's important as far as the discussion is concerned on the topic of what does this statement in the Talmud Yerushalmi mean. There's debate on it. It says, "Ein lecha reshut lehosif." So it's like you don't have permission to add lehosif al matbea shetav'u hachamim b'Berakhot. So what does it mean? You don't have permission to add to the formula the sages coined for blessings. If it means that as long as you don't change the meaning or the theme, you can make small variations, then good to go, because all type of changes occur in the language, but they maintain the meaning. But in this Talmud Yerushalmi, which is interesting because this is where the statement comes from, there's a very small change to the nusach of the first blessing of the Amidah. So Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Yonatan, sorry, they're in Israel, they're in the south, and they come to a place where they hear a reader praying, and he adds to the first blessing of the Amidah. I'm sure you're all familiar with Ha'el, Hagadol, Hagibor, Hanora, El Elyon, Gomel, so on and so forth. But here the reader adds something just slightly. He says Ha'el, Hagadol, Hagibor, Hanora, Ha'abir, Ha'amis, Ve'shiteku Otho. So basically adding the phrase the noble and overpowering. Which is just the smallest variation. It's not a huge change, but here is where they stop him and told him, "You're not permitted to do this. You can't add to the formula the sages coin." So just bringing that up to say, the change from the nosach of Sa'ad Gaon, for example, which is much earlier, versus what we see in the much longer version of a lot of the Berakhot actually, is interesting to note, considering that this statement comes from the Talmud Yerushalmi, and the example that we have here is a very small change. But in any case, remember the much longer one, and now we're going to read the shorter one from Sa'ad Gaon, which just simply states, Refa'enu Adonai v'nerafeh hoshienu v'nivashea Baruch atah Adonai rofeh cholei amo Yisrael, which is heal us, Adonai, we will be healed, save us, and we will be saved. Blessed are you, Adonai, who heals the sick of your people Israel. So it's a very short nusach, and now I'll go to Reseh. All right, now moving on to Reseh. I'm not going to do the whole nusach of Reseh, but just know that Reseh is Reseh Adonai Eloheinu. It's like receive our prayers, Adonai our Elohim. That's essentially how I would translate it. And so, but if you look at the ending, I'm really just looking at the Hatimah, which is the ending, the Baruch atah Adonai formulation. And those who hold that this statement in the Talmud Yerushalmi means that statement doesn't mean we're not allowed to make small changes. As long as we maintain the theme, it's okay, but we definitely can't change the Hatimah, the ending. Most of the people I've talked to would hold that way. But it's interesting that the only entire place, the only ending of this berakha that we have in the Talmud is actually found again in Talmud Yerushalmi, and the Hatimah is completely different than the traditional one which we're used to from the Nusach Bavli, meaning the Nusach from the Talmud Bavli tradition. So the Nusach from the Talmud Bavli, it ends Baruch atah Adonai hamachazir shechinato leSion. Blessed are you, Adonai, who returns his divine presence to Sion. So that's an interesting nusach in and of itself, considering the discussion of the Amidah being put together by Anshe Knesset Hagidolah. But that's another topic. However, this is the Hatimah for Reseh in the traditional nusach. Whether it's Sephardic or Ashkenazi or Temani or whatever, this is the traditional one. But now I'm gonna pull up a photo of the only Siddur which I'm familiar with that has the Hatimah from the Talmud Yerushalmi, apart from the Ashkenazi Machzor. I believe for Rosh Hashanah and Kippur, Ashkenazim at Musaf have this nusach as well, but they take one of the words out. But in any case, I'm gonna pull it up now. All right, so that last photo was again from the Spanish and Portuguese Siddur by Rabbi David de Solapul. So the nusach which I'm going to quote is in the photo. The photo is from the Siddur of Hacham Sassoon, which I've mentioned in other recordings before. Now the nusach here is certainly different than any traditional nusach of Reseh, because it takes out all of the parts about the fire offerings of the korbanot, because it's well known that Chacham Sassoon writes about the korbanot and how it's much preferable to offer genuine heartfelt prayer as opposed to animal sacrifices. So you would expect something like that in one of his Siddurim. The point isn't to harp on that issue, but I'm just showing you this photo because This nusach in his Siddur, he captures the ending of the Hatima of Reseh, just like Talmud Yerushalmi, which is found in Sotah in chapter 7. So the phrase goes as follows: Baruch atah Adonai she'otecha levadecha b'yirah na'avod, which means, for you alone in awe we worship. So beautiful nusach, and that nusach makes a lot more sense to have been instituted by Ezra and the men of the Great Assembly, considering at that time the temple, the second temple, would have still been standing. But Hamachazir Shechinato LeSion, restore your divine presence to Sion, sounds like something that would have been instituted after some devastation or some type of event which would lead to the people seeing the Shekhinah as being gone from the area. So in any case, those are the two changes which I'm going to show. There's, like I said, others that are interesting to make note of, especially the first berakha of the Amidah. That one has already been done and shown by others on YouTube, and you can look it up. The difference between Nusach Eretz Yisrael versus the Nusach Bavli, which the verbiage there is completely different. They're two completely different Nuschaot, but it's still interesting if you want to look into it.